Hello. You don't know who I am. But today, we need to talk. And we need to talk about Final Fantasy. Recently, I was talking with a colleague of mine about some video games we've been playing. I mentioned that I was once again playing some Final Fantasy, and they mentioned to me that they've always wanted to play Final Fantasy, but didn't know where to start. And I thought, well, just pick a game and play. And they're like, well, but it's Final Fantasy, right now we're on 16. So it's like, that's way too many games. I don't know where to start. Should I start at 1 and go 1, 2, 3, 4? And then that's when I realized, oh, you know what? You don't understand Final Fantasy. That's not your fault. It's kind of Square Enix's fault. And that is, Final Fantasy isn't a game about sequels or prequels. It's an anthology series. And so with that little bit of information, they then asked, well, then which Final Fantasy should I start with? So each of the numbered games is a completely different game, all within itself. And even though the Final Fantasy main number games are all different, there are specific things that keep a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy experience. The place to start your Final Fantasy journey, if you have never played a Final Fantasy game yet, the one to start with is Final Fantasy X. Yes, Final Fantasy X is the best place to start your Final Fantasy journey, and here are my reasons why. I think so. Yes, look at that. Good stuff. Now, one of the best things about Final Fantasy X is that this is readily available almost anywhere, and it is very inexpensive. You can get it, of course, originally for like the PlayStation 2, right? So you can play it here as needed. And then they've also done a remastered version on the PlayStation 3, so you can play it here if you need to. And then I believe this version was also released for the PS4 and the Xbox One. And then if you need Final Fantasy X on the go, we've got it for the Vita as well. And this version was also released for the Switch. Final Fantasy X is also the best bridge of old school to new school. This just brings them together. There's so much great stuff to talk about with Final Fantasy X. There's so many reasons why this game is a perfect one to start with. Let's start with combat. Let's just talk about their combat. You've got the new combat here in Final Fantasy X is not just, it is turn-based, but it's an intuitive and a flowing turn-based. It's CTB, called a conditional turn-based. It's the first one that allows you to just swap characters. You get to flow through characters that you want, who are going to need to help you for this battle. And it really brings a good depth to the combat. And it also allows you to see how the different characters can play. Oh, yeah, the combat is so much fun in this game. And then let's just talk about character development and leveling. Remember how I mentioned there are specific archetypes across Final Fantasy games, like your white mage, your fighter, your thief, dragoons, black mage, things like that? Well, Final Fantasy X introduces the sphere grid to you. And that was revolutionary and still revolutionary. It is so much fun. It is such a great way to be able to level and control your character. And so within the sphere grid, you're then able to select where you want and what you want that character to develop into. If you want Yuna to be a white mage, you can make her that. If you want Tidus to be a black mage, you can make him that. If you want Kamari to be a thief, you can make him into that. Or if you want to do an amalgamation of all kinds of different classes, you can do that. You can pick and choose for the most part, and then really just make the character that you want, customize them to however you see fit for that certain playthrough. And this then affords multiple playthroughs because you can then build each character differently, or you can build them all the same. You can just decide to have the same kind of character for everybody and see how that takes you. And it just offers you a wide variety of flexibility and ways to develop your character and really make them your own. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a true Final Fantasy game without a crazy, awesome story. And this is a wonderful story. This is a great story of some type of, a little bit of redemption, a great little love story, a story of friendship, story of, even there's some good family pieces in here. This game. Of course, it's got, as all Final Fantasies do, you've got your easy to grasp notions and currents and themes of the story that you can get into, and then there's those pieces of the story that are kind of out there that you really gotta really go into maybe some of the the lore for, and maybe do a bit more reading of things, which hopefully will make sense as time goes on, as you get further and further into the game. And then, of course, there's one or two that you may just be clueless about. But hey, that's a good story, right? You got all sorts of different levels that this draws you in and keeps you. It keeps you around. It keeps you rooted. It keeps you wanting to see what the next turn of events is, what maybe the next twist is, or who the next villain may be once you vanquish the current villain you're after. And then, what's a great part of a game? Well, a great part of a game is we get to the end, when you get to see the resolution of everything, and you get to see all the hard work that you put in with these characters and the time you spent with them, when you get to see what it is that they've been striving for, and how does it all come together, and how does it all end, and how does it wrap up. And let me tell you that Final Fantasy X has one of the best, one of the most moving resolutions, endings to a game that Square Enix has done. This Final Fantasy has got such an exquisite ending. You need to play it so you can experience it, not watch it on YouTube or anything. You need to actually see it so you can be there, because when it gets that culmination, finally, it's amazing, and it makes the journey all worth it. Another great thing about Final Fantasy X is that the length of it is just right. I actually found an old save file for Final Fantasy X on one of my PlayStation 2 memory cards, and it was at close to the very end, I think right before the last boss battle, right where it allows you to save last, and it was just under 55 hours, so I put in just a little over 54 hours or so, and that's a great time length for a beautiful role-playing game like this. Now, you can always spend a lot more hours in this game because there's a lot of Blitzball to play, which is its mini-game, which is an underwater soccer/football game. And yes, underwater. And it is a lot of fun, and you do get a chance to play a lot of it. And if you want, you can play a heck of a lot and see how well you can do against all the other teams across the world here that Final Fantasy presents to us in 10. And then there's ultimate weapons to chase after, and I never chased after those. I just got the best that you could get along the way. And then there are, of course, the optional massive side bosses that are just crazy, that are the peak of the peak for people who really want to challenge themselves. Another thing that really brings Final Fantasy X home and really makes it worth stepping into as your first experience is that it's got the first game with voice acting. And the voice acting is great. And yes, there is that one scene that is memed out there a lot with Tidus and Yuna, and they're laughing. But that is taken out of context. And when you are in the game and you experience that for what it is within the story, it is a very moving moment, and it has a lot of meaning behind it. Another thing that, of course, helps is that with the HD remasters, the graphics, have been upres, and they're still beautiful. The color is still as vibrant as ever. The music, of course, for Final Fantasy X is a notch above. It's hard to say which Final Fantasy has the best music, because that is something that Final Fantasy in every game strives to bring you, is some crazy, really good music. But yeah, 10 has some amazing tunes that you really want to listen to, and that you'll be listening to plenty of times when you're not playing a game. You will throw on that soundtrack through whatever means you have possible, because it is fantastic. Yeah, and with it being available like everywhere, it is reasonably priced. You can always pick up a PS2 or a PS3, and probably the same for the Xbox One version for under $10. The Switch and Vita versions are probably a little bit more, but It's very accessible, and we have all kinds of devices to play it on, and you don't have any more excuses now to not play Final Fantasy X, because if you have not played any Final Fantasy, this is the place to start. Yeah. And the characters, the environment, the story, the world building, the protagonists, the antagonists, all the good guys and the bad guys, all the NPCs. It's such an amazing world to be in and to immerse yourself into. Every character, I don't think there was a playable character that you get to use in your party that I didn't like. They were all great. They all had cool, great backstories that I got into. They all had motivations and their own little demons they're fighting with and their own personal turmoils that they're going through. And it was everything about Final Fantasy X just hits just right and really brings the full experience for what a Final Fantasy game is right to you. So as I gave that little piece of advice to my colleague, I'm now giving it out here to you as well. And that is, if you haven't started Final Fantasy, but you do want to play one of the games, start with Final Fantasy X. You will not be disappointed. All right. I hope to hear back from you. I hope to hear back how much you loved it. And I know that you can start all kinds of different Final Fantasies, and I love each one in so many different ways, but 10 is the best place to be introduced into what a Final Fantasy experience is. All right, as always, thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. And until then, all right, and as always, or what is it? Oh, and as always, game on.